The day IBRAHIM Traoré silenced Marjorie Taylor Greene in front of the world, it was a warm May morning in 2025 when Marjorie Taylor Greene, a far-right Republican congresswoman from Georgia, launched into a live tirade on Twitter Spaces, targeting IBRAHIM Traoré, the 35-year-old revolutionary president of Burkina Faso, with over 45,000 listeners tuned in. Greene didn't hold back. Her words were blunt, even cruel. "This African kid needs to shut up and stop lecturing America. Who does he think he is?" Thousands of miles away in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, President Traoré was in a cabinet meeting when his communications advisor, Yakuba Sowadogo, rushed into the room, holding his phone with urgency. "Mr. President," he said, breathless, "a U.S. congresswoman is saying very serious things about ULIV, and it's escalating fast." IBRAHIM paused mid-sentence, sensing the tension in Yakuba's voice. He had grown accustomed to criticism, especially from the West, but something about this seemed different. "What exactly is she saying?" he asked calmly, as the ministers around the table leaned in. "She called you an African boy, said you should shut up, that you have no right to criticize America." A heavy silence fell over the room. Traoré knew who Marjorie Taylor Greene was, infamous for her conspiracy theories, inflammatory rhetoric, and media spectacle. But attacking a sitting foreign head of state in front of tens of thousands during a live broadcast was unprecedented. Even for her. "How many are listening now?" he asked, still composed. "Over 45,000. And rising quickly." IBRAHIM stood up, walked toward the large glass window overlooking Ouagadougou's busy streets. Below, his people were going about their day, trading goods, going to school, building the future they believed in, a future they had entrusted to him. "Yakuba," he said, turning back, "connect me to this broadcast." There was a sharp intake of breath around the table. It was a bold move, a live confrontation, without a script, against one of the most controversial politicians in the United States. "Mr. President," said Dr. Alonso Ouedraogo, the foreign minister. Perhaps a more measured response would be. IBRAHIM raised his hand. "Doctor, with all due respect, she told me to shut up and called me a kid. That's not diplomacy. That's an insult." Yakuba was already working furiously on his phone. "I have the feed, sir. You can join right now." In Washington, Greene continued, her voice loud and scornful. "These African leaders think they can teach us democracy. America doesn't need lectures from third-world dictators." Her words sparked an explosion of comments, some cheering, many condemning, and then a notification appeared. IBRAHIM Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, has requested to join the conversation. Marjorie laughed, clearly amused. "Look who wants to speak, the African boy himself." She accepted the request without hesitation, convinced she could embarrass him live. "Welcome to the show, President," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Ready to hear some hard truths about your country?" Across the Atlantic, IBRAHIM took a slow breath. He had faced terrorists, economic sabotage, and foreign interference. This was just another battlefield. "Thank you for having me, Congresswoman," he said, his voice calm and crisp. Now broadcast to over 50,000 live listeners. "I'm here to clarify a few misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings," she scoffed. "You think you have moral authority to talk about democracy?" IBRAHIM didn't flinch. "Congresswoman, may I ask, do you know where Burkina Faso is?" A beat of awkward silence. "Of course, it's ... in Africa." "Very good," IBRAHIM replied. "And do you know our capital?" "That's irrelevant. What matters is, it's what." "Since we're doing basic geography, could you tell me Burkina Faso's GDP per capita?" "I don't need to know technical details," she snapped. "Interesting," IBRAHIM said, his tone sharpening. "Because you're criticizing a country you clearly know nothing about. That reminds me, weren't you the one who claimed California wildfires were caused by Jewish space lasers?" The chat exploded, laughter, disbelief, mockery. "That's a distortion," she began. "Didn't you also say COVID vaccines contained tracking microchips, and that 9/11 was an inside job?" Greene stumbled, visibly shaken. "You have no right to." "Congresswoman," IBRAHIM interrupted, voice now commanding. "You called me a kid, told me to shut up. I think it's time I show you why that was a mistake." The audience count crossed 70,000. On social media, hashtags like #TRAOREVs Greene and #Diplomatic Knockout started trending. "Let's talk facts," IBRAHIM continued. "You represent the state of Georgia, correct? A state built on African slave labor for generations. That was in the past." "Exactly, just as many of Africa's challenges today are rooted in European and American colonial exploitation. But let's focus on the present." He took a brief sip of water and resumed. "Under my leadership, Burkina Faso has reduced extreme poverty by 31% in just 3 years. How much has Georgia reduced poverty in that time?" Greene didn't answer. "We've built 847 new schools. How many have been built in Georgia?" Still silence. "Our literacy rate rose from 67% to 84%. Georgia still has counties with rates below that." He leaned into the mic. You voted against the infrastructure bill that could have brought $2 billion to your state. Meanwhile, we on a fraction of your resources paved 750 miles of rural roads in a year. The comment feed lit up like wildfire. Fire emojis, applause. Reporters joined the space. American journalists were now quoting his every word. You also voted against Medicaid expansion and in healthcare to over 450,000 Georgians. We reduced infant mortality by 28% in the same time. Greene tried to interject, but it was clear she was drowning in her own rhetoric. The more she tried to defend herself, the deeper she sank. Traoré had come to defend his people. What he ended up doing was much more. He delivered a global lesson in grace, facts, and fearless leadership, because that day, the world didn't just witness a verbal debate. They witnessed the rise of a new voice in global politics, a voice from Africa.com, confident and utterly unshakable. And as IBRAHIM Traoré signed off that morning, one truth echoed through every speaker and screen. The age of African silence was over. It was a moment that history would not forget, a spontaneous, unscripted confrontation that turned into a global reckoning. As the live debate between U.S. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and President IBRAHIM Traoré of Burkina Faso continued to escalate, Greene made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. She tried to interrupt, to redirect, to insult, but Traoré.com and relentless continued to dismantle her arguments piece by piece. And while we're on the subject of democracy, Congresswoman, he said, his voice steady, have you not yourself attempted to overturn legitimate election results in your own country? Have you not played an active role in efforts to subvert the will of the American people? The question struck hard, a verbal missile, aimed directly at her political record. The tension in the virtual room was electric. Over 80,000 listeners were now tuned in, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had begun the broadcast by mocking an African boy, was now being methodically, publicly, and unequivocally humiliated, not by insults, but by facts. Congresswoman Traoré continued. Let's move to something simpler, something perhaps more familiar to you. Numbers. Economic numbers. His tone remained respectful, even polite, but his words were razor-sharp. Burkina Faso has a population of 22 million and an annual federal budget of $4.2 billion. With that limited funding, we've created over 340,000 direct jobs in just 2 years. Greene tried to interrupt. But you're still poor. Yes, he replied calmly. We are a developing country, but here's the difference. We are making measurable progress, using our own resources, with our own hands. Meanwhile, the state you represent, with far more wealth, infrastructure, and historical advantage, is experiencing unemployment levels comparable to ours. Then came the dagger. Youth unemployment in Georgia stands at 18.3%. In Burkina Faso, it's 17.8%. So, by your own logic, the so-called third world dictator you attempted to belittle is currently creating more opportunities for young people than your own American state. Greene fell silent. And the silence was deafening. Seizing the moment, IBRAHIM delivered the final blow. And since you're so fond of conspiracy theories, he said, pausing for effect, let me offer a theory of my own. Maybe the real problem isn't that an African leader is offering advice to America. Maybe the problem is that an American congresswoman, who seems unfamiliar with her own state statistics, is giving opinions about countries she has never even visited. The comment section exploded. Hashtags like hashtag TRA or E, acute demolishes Greene, hashtag Burkina Facts, and hashtag Marjorie silenced trended globally within minutes. Clips of the exchange began circulating across social media at lightning speed. Congresswoman IBRAHIM said, his tone composed but firm as he prepared to close. You told me to shut up, but I was taught in both military and academic institutions that when you are attacked without justification, you don't respond with rage, you respond with facts. He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he smiled, not smugly, but with quiet confidence. Now, I'd like to make a public invitation. Come visit Burkina Faso, see with your own eyes what this African boy has achieved with limited means. In one of the world's toughest environments, you might just learn something about real leadership. By the time the broadcast ended, the live audience had reached 95,000 listeners. And, in a final act of retreat, Marjorie Taylor Greene disconnected from the silence, her face metaphorically buried beneath the weight of her own miscalculated arrogance. But the damage was already done. In mere minutes, the debate became an internet wildfire. On Twitter, hashtag dunked by TRAORE and hashtag Greene vs Africa climbed the trends. Within an hour, video clips had surpassed 2 million views. In Ouagadougou, as President Traoré ended the call, his cabinet room remained frozen, until his foreign minister, Dr. Ouedraogo, slowly began to clap. One by one, the ministers rose to their feet in applause. Mr. President, said Yakuba, looking up from his phone, astonished, the numbers are incredible. The broadcast peaked at 98,000 live listeners. and the clips are being replayed across 5 continents. Back in Washington, chaos had descended on Marjorie Taylor Greene's office. Her press secretary, Jennifer Walsh, frantically fielded calls from journalists. "Congresswoman," she said urgently, "we need a damage control plan, now." CNN, BBC, Reuters, everyone's calling. Greene was pacing in fury. "That damn African made me look like a fool. How did he even know all those stats about Georgia?" He was clearly prepared. "Ma'am," Jennifer replied, and well, everything he said was factually accurate. "I don't care, just fix this." But it was already far beyond fixing. That evening, CNN's Anderson Cooper opened his broadcast with the headline, "American Congresswoman Humiliated by African President in Viral Debate." Even Fox News' Tucker Carlson, often supportive of Greene, conceded. Politics aside, the man was prepared, and he made his point. In the halls of Congress, Republican lawmakers began to distance themselves. One representative from Texas said bluntly, "What she did, attacking a foreign head of state like that, it's indefensible." Even former President Donald Trump, sensing the shift in public sentiment, tweeted, "I respect prepared leaders from any country. Diplomacy must remain civil." In Africa, however, the reaction was transformative. President Traoré's phone didn't stop ringing. Leaders from across the continent called to congratulate him. The president of Senegal, "You defended the dignity of all Africa today." The president of Nigeria, "Brother, that was historic." In the 24 hours following the confrontation, IBRAHIM Traoré awoke to a new reality, not just as the leader of Burkina Faso, but as a symbol of Africa's emerging voice. His foreign affairs advisor, Aminata Kone, walked into his office carrying a stack of interview requests. "Mr. President," she said, smiling. "Send NANM baby send LHC. France 24 Deutsche Welle. 47 others are requesting interviews." Ibrahim sipped his coffee, flipping through newspapers. The Guardian, Young African President Schools, U.S. Lawmaker and Facts. Le Monde, When Africa Answered with Grace. Die Spiegel, The Moment Africa Found Its Voice. At Harvard, Stanford, and other top U.S. universities, students and professors dissected the exchange in real-time debates. At Harvard Law, Professor Michael Thompson told his class, "This will be remembered as a case study in how preparation defeats populism." Even in Georgia, Greene's home state, criticism was mounting. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution editor, "Our representative has embarrassed us on the world stage." Georgia's business leaders began to voice concern. One prominent CEO said, "This hurts our image abroad. We don't want to be associated with this kind of behavior." Across Africa, pride surged. In South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa said Traoré showed that Africa now speaks with intelligence and dignity. In Kenya, President William Ruto added, "He defended all of us." That wasn't just about Burkina Faso, that was about Africa's place in the world. In China, state media reported, when the world's largest economy is intellectually outmatched by a rising African state, it's time to ask who's really leading. In Russia, Putin commented, "Riley, new leaders are emerging, and the world is watching." And in global financial markets, the impact was almost immediate. 3 major European investment funds announced interest in Burkina Faso's infrastructure and energy sectors, a sign that credibility had shifted. Because that day wasn't just about a debate, it was the moment a young African leader, once dismissed as a kid, stood tall on the world stage and reminded everyone watching that intelligence has no flag, and leadership needs no permission. 6 months after that unforgettable confrontation between President Ibrahim Traoré and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, the world had, in many ways, transformed, and so had the global perception of Africa. Infrastructural cranes dotted Burkina Faso's skyline. Roads were being laid, hospitals constructed, universities expanded. A senior analyst in London, speaking on international media, summarized the mood. President Traoré's performance in the public arena has projected not just charisma, but competence. In a world that often overlooks African leadership, he has demonstrated discipline, intellect, and stability. Back in Washington, the political fallout for Marjorie Taylor Greene had become undeniable. The backlash in Congress was swift and bipartisan. Democrats led the charge, preparing a formal censure motion, while even members of her own party, usually loyal, voiced concern. "She crossed a diplomatic line," said the Democratic Majority Leader. "To attack an allied head of state in that manner is not only inappropriate, it's destabilizing." Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, trying to contain the damage without escalating internal party tensions, stepped before the press and offered a carefully crafted response. "I will be speaking privately with Congresswoman Greene about the importance of diplomatic decorum and the role we play on the global stage." Meanwhile, President Traoré chose not to rest on his viral victory. Instead, he turned the moment into a movement. With astute timing, he announced a speaking tour of the United States, accepting invitations from elite institutions like Georgetown, Columbia, and Yale. "We're not here to build walls," he said during an interview with CNN. "We're here to build bridges." His lectures sold out within hours. Over 3,000 people attended his first event at Georgetown University, where Traoré addressed a packed auditorium of students, diplomats, and academics. Africa does not need saviors, he said to a 5-minute standing ovation. What we need are partners who respect us as equals. Back home, his people watched proudly as 3 major American companies announced $800 million in investment into Burkina Faso in sectors ranging from renewable energy to digital infrastructure. The country's tourism board reported a 340% surge in international interest. As the tourism minister joked, the world wants to meet the country of the president who humbled a U.S. congresswoman. But Traoré remained grounded. During a cabinet meeting, he reminded his ministers, "We cannot let a viral moment overshadow the real work. Our mission is nation-building." Yet the global spotlight refused to dim. BBC cameras followed him as he inaugurated a new rural school. Al Jazeera aired a segment as he toured a newly equipped maternity hospital. From the international press to social media influencers, everyone was now watching. The so-called African boy that Marjorie tried to silence had become a continental icon. Then, 2 weeks after the viral clash, Traoré prepared something even more impactful, a formal national address, to be broadcast live across 80 global networks. Inside the palace in Ouagadougou, he spoke with his senior aide, Aminata Kone. "This speech," he said, "is not about what happened with the congresswoman. It's about who we are and who we intend to become." Dressed in elegant, traditional, Burkinabe attire, President IBRAHIM Traoré stood before the world. Dignitaries from 45 nations filled the chamber. The world watched in anticipation. Citizens of Burkina Faso, friends of Africa, and partners around the world. He began, "In recent weeks, our country was placed in the global spotlight in a way we did not anticipate. A U.S. congresswoman tried to diminish our voice, but instead of silencing us, she amplified it." His words echoed with dignity, not resentment. "We did not respond with rage. We responded with facts. We didn't insult. We educated. Because that is who we are, a people that values truth, growth, and respect." Behind him, a series of graphs showed the tangible effects since the episode. 12 international investment offers, 234 academic partnerships proposed, 18 new diplomatic cooperation requests, but Ibrahim pushed deeper. "These numbers are encouraging," he said, "but they are not the true measure of victory. Our real success is proving that modern Africa is articulate, prepared, and ready to lead." He paused deliberately. "Yes, we are young. Yes, we come from a continent that has been historically underdeveloped. But that does not make us lesser, it makes us more determined." Then came the most quoted moment of the night. She called, "Me an African boy. I accept that title with pride. I am young, I am African, and I am building a better future for my people." More than 15 million people watched the speech live. When it ended, the cameras zoomed in as Traoré made his final statement. "To America, we say, we are your friends, not your inferiors. To Europe, we say, we are partners, not charity cases. To the world, we say, Africa is ready to sit at the global table, and we come prepared." 6 months later, Traoré was in New York, not as a symbolic figure from a peripheral country, but as a keynote speaker at the UN General Assembly, addressing world leaders on youth leadership in the 21st century, and the results back home were staggering. Burkina Faso had secured $3.2 billion in foreign investment, launched 5 new universities, and recorded a stunning 18% GDP growth in just half a year. During a cabinet meeting, Foreign Minister Dr. Ouagadougou leaned over and whispered, "Would have thought a spat with a congresswoman could change the destiny of our nation." But Ibrahim, ever humble, shook his head. The confrontation was only a spark, the fire that was already burning. Our people were always ready. The world just wasn't paying attention. And as he strolled one evening through the palace gardens with his wife Ajara, she said softly, "You changed the way the world sees Africa." He smiled, gazing at the stars. "No," he replied, "I just showed them who we've always been." In a world where power is often mistaken for volume, Ibrahim Traoré had proven that dignity, discipline, and data could do something no shouting match ever could: rewrite a continent's place in history.